Welcome to All Seasons Podcast. I'm your host, LoLo Paz, a nurse, rainbow mama, holistic health nerd, and entrepreneur. This isn't your typical podcast. Some episodes are raw and juicy conversations, and others are mindful practices that will leave you encouraged. Together, we're creating a space that bridges the gap between black and white faith and the gray of real life. We will explore all things in all seasons of life, from loss, mental health, faith, motherhood, and holistic wellness. Come as you are, my friend. Let's jump right in. I am so honored to have my good friend Justin McRoberts on this podcast today, you guys. If you don't know him, you need to know him and the work he's doing. I'm so excited to jump into this conversation. But Justin is a coach, author, a retreat leader. He's written 8 books, including a recent collection of poems entitled Rest. He lives in Martinez with his wife and his kids, and he calls his mom every day. Justin McRoberts, welcome to All Seasons Podcast. It is
stoked to be here.
It is such an honor to have you here. And a long time coming. So for those of you who may or may not know, I know we just kind of gave you the spiel and background of Justin and all the incredible things that he does and is working on. But gosh, Justin, you and I go back to some young life roots. In my early 20s, him and his wife, Amy, were leaders for me when I was in summer staff. And so I was reflecting on that first initial meeting with you and Amy. And at that point, with starry eyes, I was looking at you and Amy and your marriage. And, you guys are, the next chapter in life. And I remember watching and looking with admiration. And I still do from afar, but now on social media. But nonetheless, it's been such a joy and an honor to know you and call you a friend.
Thanks.
Really cool to see the evolution of your work, which we'll dive into today.
Awesome. No, I'm thrilled to do this and do a little kind of twofold, like catch up and do some of today's work too.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah. How are you arriving today? How are you showing up?
My fall has been really good and very crowded, which is pretty normal for me now. I take a lot of time off in the summer, like a lot, because my kids are off in the summer.
Yeah.
So I made a decision a few years ago that I would make the sacrifice play and say no to a bunch of stuff in the summer, which meant that I would therefore then say yes to a lot of stuff in the fall. They're not as available, but what that means is I pay for what I pay for my time off.
Sure.
I have no qualms about that whatsoever. So I'll get to a point like now, coming into Thanksgiving break. And I'm very happy to be taking some time off because I was gone all but 4 days in October.
Oh.
And then I just got back from a 10-day trip to kick off or start right smack dab in the middle of November. All that's great. But this is the price I pay for making sure that I'm like hyper available in the summer.
Yeah. I can resonate for sure.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, I feel like I don't know. And there's something about the fall. I feel like where some creativity and some new downloads are coming in too. And
yes,
in a lot of ways as a creative, some things are kind of like ramping up, which is kind of beautiful.
Yeah. There's a whole different energy for me in the fall. It's always been the case is that and I think it's other people's energy. Like I pick up on other people's needs, demands. So I'm not like a full-blown empath, but I do pick up on like what's going on around me culturally and otherwise. And so the fall tends to be a little bit more electric.
Yeah.
And
especially this fall.
Especially this fall.
Yeah.
I try to ignore that. I try to ignore as best I can and maybe even avoid that electricity.
Yes.
That's the kind that'll fry your face off if you get too close.
Oh, that's so good. Which we can touch on some of those energetic spiritual boundaries too. But
let's do that. Yeah.
Over the course of the last, decade and a half, watching your journey as an artist, a musician, a poet, a coach, can you kind of take us back of how has your work kind of evolved over the last few years to kind of arrive at this place that you are today?
Probably the best way to get there is to talk about the ethos, like my work, like it can be easy actually once I get going. You see like the thread that runs through everything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost never that those connections that a person can make between one kind of job or kind of work to another that is problematic. The problematic piece has to do with the attachments we have
Mm-hmm.
to certain kinds of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think I may have even told you the story. I've definitely told the story before. I was on Young Life staff. I was happily on Young Life staff, and I was teaching at the same time. It's the sort of the those are what people call the two rails on the railway towards poverty. And I was living with a few single guys in a house owned by Frank Tate. Frank Tate ran a record label, and I I was playing music just as a way to process life. And Frank came to me one night and said, "Have you ever thought about playing music for a living?" I was like,
Mm.
no, that sounds cool. You like the songs?" He said, "No, the songs aren't good. The songs are not good. But I like you as a person," which is the weirdest compliment I had received in my life up to that point. Fast fast forward like 6 or so months. For those who aren't familiar with Young Life, it tends to work in seasons. Most of the students that I was caring for at the time were seniors and were graduating, so there was going to be kind of
Mm.
a restarting process, anyways.
Mhm.
It seemed like an okay time to step away. So fast forward 6 months, and I'm in the studio in Concord, California, making a record for the very first time. And Frank flies me to Nashville, Tennessee, to this very important music industry thing where all these artists who are part of the Christian industry get together and they highlight their music. So at this showcase, record label industry person gets up and says, "Behind me is so and so," and people clap because 90% of the folks on the stage, folks already knew. And then they would say something magical like, "It's this artist it's like if Aretha Franklin and the Beatles had a child, and that child was an evangelical Christian. That's this kid. That's this artist, and they're gonna change the face of rock and roll.
Oh my god.
They're getting downloads spiritually from the Holy Spirit every day, and then they'd introduce the artist and walk off."
Mhm.
And after giving away a bunch of free stuff, Frank gets out there and he says, "Hey, I'm Frank. I'm with 5 Minute Walk, and we didn't bring any free stuff for you because we don't feel like we should have to bribe you," which is just like, that's a killer. And he says, "This is Justin McRoberts. He's the artist we're focusing on this year, and I'm going to be honest, he's not very good." This is the intro.
Oh.
This is the. I've been standing up there with a guitar for like 90 seconds, and he's like, he's not very good. And the room legit like did one of those like, "Are you serious?" And then he said, "But I think most of the artists and bands you see this morning probably won't be around 2 or 3 years from now because this is hard to do. I think Justin will be around 15 or 20 years from now, and the work he'll be making then is going to be really good. So I'm making a long-term investment. And if you don't want to make it with me, I don't really care." And then he walked off. And I was like,
Wow.
"Oh, this song sucks." And here it is.
Oh.
But what he did for me, I mean, it wasn't just the moment. I tell the story because it's funny. What he did for me was Frank just wasn't attached to like whatever the first record was going to be. So the first record came out and it did way better than we thought it was going to.
Mhm.
But that didn't matter that much. And then the second record came out and we put a bunch of time and energy into it and more money than we had before, and it didn't do very well. But that didn't matter very much.
Mhm.
And Frank did this very like desert fathers, desert mothers, like Zen guru thing without knowing it, which is like he was teaching me detachment. That like, that's cool, like do this. But
Yeah.
this thing isn't the thing that matters.
Mm.
And the next thing isn't the thing that matters. Who you become as you do these things is what matters. He wasn't making an investment in like my ability to generate sales. He was making an investment in me as a person. I still work with Frank Tate. I'm 50. I met him in my early 20s. We still partner together on business stuff because we have that kind of partnership. And because if he asks me to do something, unlike so many of my other business partnerships, I know that I'm not going to get used and left in the lurch because it's not about achievement. what that did for me, and I promise this is the long answer to a short question, is when I started noticing that there was different, more enjoyable and better fruit born
Mm.
like elsewhere outside of music, it
Mhm.
didn't feel like I was blowing it or abandoning anything about myself.
Mm.
I could let go. Like when music just no longer, when I'm a 50-year-old straight white male, this is not my cultural rock and roll moment. Like it's like I'm not on the short list anywhere for people like, you know what we need? You know, you know what we need for this moment right now? We're looking for some entertainment. What do we got?
Uh,
That guy's older. Um, no one's doing that. So when I was no longer whatever people call relevant, when it was like when stuff stopped working,
yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
It wasn't about the thing. So
Yeah.
I was able to follow a thread from that. What I liked about music wasn't like the rock and roll part of it. That's enjoyable, but I liked the people part.
Hmm.
And so I was like, I would hang out with people afterwards, and
Mhm.
I would talk a bunch while I was playing. And both those things parlay themselves into like teaching and writing, and then
Yeah.
like coaching and mentoring, and then teaching and writing, coaching and mentoring parlayed into like podcast stuff and the retreats and the
Mm.
spiritual formation. And I was able to follow the thread wherever it was leading because I never got attached to the
Mm.
particular moment. So
Mm.
that's the long answer to a short question is
Mm.
I have felt the freedom to evolve and change and grow
Mhm.
because I've never actually been attached to a job.
Mhm. That's beautiful. And also kind of what I'm mirroring and hearing from you too is like so often I think artists of any kind, creatives of any kind get so caught up in a means to an end, right? Getting to the end of a
Yes.
project, completing something, and they completely lose themselves in the process, or they're just so obsessive about the end result. And what's interesting is like you found yourself in the meandering in the middle. Um, and just as like an observer of your work, I think that's kind of what you inspire and invite people into is to find
Hmm.
the magic in the messy, right? The magic in the middle, that liminal space. And oftentimes I think when we rush through that, when we power through that, we miss it. We miss a lot of that. So that's kind of where the pulling of the thread, is offered to us. So it's really,
Yes.
but we're so obsessed, so to speak, with like the final garment, right? That we didn't even pay
Yes.
attention to, you know, the beauty of the material and the textile of it. So
Yes, and
it's
it's
beautiful.
the invitation that like failure and disappointment offer us that we also where I think
Mhm.
because I agree with you that we miss it. I think where we actually miss it is mostly is when things don't go the way we wished or wanted or dreamt,
Mhm.
which is really the real that's the real one. It's like
Yeah,
when we can wish something, we can want something, but as soon as we have that dream, like it's gonna look like this.
sure.
When the dream doesn't show up and disappointment sets in,
Mhm.
part of the invitation that disappointment, disillusionment offer is to actually hit pause
Mhm.
and to if this wasn't true about it, can I look back and figure out what was? If this wasn't
Mhm.
perfect about it and good about it,
Yeah.
can I look back and see what was and then
Mhm.
relearn myself and relearn my process? Where we tend to
Mhm.
really miss
Yeah.
is not so much along the way, although that's true,
Mhm.
but we really miss like when shit goes sideways or doesn't go the way we want it, we miss because disappointment asks us to reevaluate,
Mhm.
and we do a pretty bad job of that. We tend to just move
Yeah.
on to the next thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I know there's a quote that's floating around in my brain, but it's also been studied that we actually, as humans, don't learn through experience. Like we've been told, like, just try, learn from your experiences. You actually learn from reflecting on your
Yep,
experiences. And that's,
I know the quote. I'm going to look it up right now.
oh,
It's
yeah.
hold on. I can't not. I'm with you. It's John Dewey.
Yes.
John Dewey wrote, philosopher, other person. We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on
Mm-hmm.
experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 100% true.
Mm,
Yeah, I buy that.
yeah. Which is actually a beautiful segue to your most recent work and what you're doing now. So can you kind of talk to us about your relationship with rest? Um,
Yes.
talk about your new book. How has your relationship with rest evolved?
Let's work backwards.
Okay.
So, and we can maybe get into some publishing things here in a minute. So the newest book was actually going to be part of the a previous book.
Mm-hmm.
So, 2 years ago, boy, I don't know,
The Sacred Stride.
before today, Yeah, Sacred Strides was like a year and a half ago or so, I
Yeah.
think. And Sacred Strides was intended to be a collection of reflections and prompts
Mm-hmm.
for folks, stories that stirred the desire to marry work and rest as kind of
Mm-hmm.
mirror twin disciplines in life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to include this series of poems,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't. Because upon reflection, I realized that this thing wasn't working the way I wanted it to,
Mm-hmm.
and so I killed my precious little idea, and let it sit for a while. So I recently released all the poems. It was like 113 poems that I wrote on rest days.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing comes from, so most of the time when I'm writing, I almost never sit down and say I'm going to write a book about XYZ and then chase that idea to the end. I'm
Mm-hmm.
usually collecting things along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, like I have a series of stories or a series of reflections or a series of poems, and then I can like gather it all and
Mm-hmm.
put it out. And that's what's happened with the Sacred Strides. Really is a collection of experiences, thoughts, wrestling matches, maybe little bits of wisdom that I've been gifted since, well, for about a quarter century. Which takes me back to this. When I started, and this is in the book, when I started playing music for a living, independent singer songwriter guy, I was toast. I was very tired,
Mm-hmm.
and but I kept telling myself the thing that I had heard, which is that being tired is just part of being an adult. And my wife got this, read this excerpt in a book, excerpt in a magazine, from a book called "The Rest of God: Restoring Your Soul by Restoring the Sabbath." And she came into this space I'm standing in right now, and she was like, "Hey, you should check this out." I was like, "What is it?" She goes, "It's an excerpt from a book." I was like, "I don't have time. I don't have time to read the excerpt. Can you give me the gist?" She's like, "You want me to give the gist of an excerpt?" I was like, "Yes, that'd be great." She's like, "It's about Sabbath keeping and rest." I was like, I don't have time for that, because
Mm-hmm.
if I don't take care of my business, no one else will," which is to some degree true.
Mm.
So then she gets the book, she comes back and she says, "I've read this book. It's really speaking to us." I'm like, "Can you give me the gist?" She's like, "I tried before." So, so we set a date on the calendar 7 weeks out. Let's practice this rest Sabbath thing on this day. And no sooner did we say that, but the following Monday or Tuesday, I get a message from some friends in Kansas City who are like, "Are you available this weekend?" And it's the exact same weekend. And I said, "I'm absolutely available. I can be there." So I tell Amy I can't do the rest thing because I'm going to go do this thing out of Heartland, Kansas City. She was like, "Okay, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just know this work and I need it."
Mm-hmm.
So I called Dan, who was the pastor of the church at the time, and he goes, and I said, "So what's the, just so I can prep, what are we doing?" Is, "Yeah, we just read this book by a guy named Mark Buchanan. It's called The Rest of God: Restoring Your Soul by Restoring the Sabbath. And we're doing a whole weekend on this book." I was like, "Great, that's fantastic."
No
Sounds
way.
like a good book. So he's, "Oh, you think it's over?" So he sends me a copy of the book. So now I have two. And I don't read the book. I read the back of the book. I read a little bit of the last chapter, and I do the thing, and you're gonna recognize this, and so many of your listeners will too. I was getting just enough of it so that I could do the work, which, in retrospect,
Mm.
upon reflection, was the shape of my health journey. It was the shape of my spiritual journey. It was
Mm.
the shape of my mental health journey. I
Wow.
was getting just healthy enough so that I could keep things running, because all of that activity was
Mm.
predicated on productivity.
Yeah.
Like the centerpiece of my life was predicated on work. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just wildly incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to Kansas City, we do the weekend, and Dan on the Sunday in between services, he's like, "Dude, you seem really tired." It's like, that's part of being an adult. He's like, "No, man, why don't you stay instead
Mm.
of fly home on Monday? Stay, take in a day or two of rest. You can, stay at they had a cabin, stay at the cabin. I'll give you some." I was like, "Actually, that sounds great. I'll do that." No sooner did I said this, that in between services, my phone goes off. It's in my pocket. And it's my friend Kirk, who lives in Nashville, Tennessee. He's like, "Hey, man, I'm in a bind. Can you be here tomorrow?" And I said, "As a matter of fact, I'm most of the way across the country. I can get to Nashville tomorrow morning. No big deal." So I tell Dan, I said, "Hey, man, I appreciate the offer of care and what have you, but I can't be there." He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Heading to Nashville." He's like, "What for?" I'm like, "I'm not entirely sure, but it's a job and I'm going to take it." So from the airport the next morning, I message Kirk. I'm like, hey, so that I can prep, like, what I'm gonna do. He goes, oh yeah, so sorry, you're song leading for this retreat for artists. I was like, great. He's like, yeah, like we had a song leader, he can't make it, and like we don't want to hire someone from Nashville. So great, I'll be there.
Mm.
Is there a theme? He goes, yeah. So we're flying in this guy. His name is Mark Buchanan. He just wrote this book called The Rest of God, Restoring Your Soul by Restoring Sabbath.
Stop it.
And he's going to be giving this retreat. I know you think it's over. It's not. It's not even close. I walk into the room the next morning. I'm already like, the hell is going on? I walk into the room and Matthew, is a tremendous singer-songwriter, and his musical partner at the time, Katie Herzig, Matthew Perryman Jones and Katie Herzig are their leading songs, and they're up there. They've got all their song sheets laid out. Everything's right. I walk in, I was like, "What are you guys doing here?" They're like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "I heard you can't make it." And they said, "Wait, no one said anything to anyone about us not being able to make it." Which is to say that at some point, the Spirit of Christ was so fed up with my resistance that like I was then like divinely hoodwinked.
Yeah.
And I sat in the room, and the first thing Mark Buchanan said was, if you're in this room, I'm going to assume that you love what you do. And we all nodded. And he said, if you love what you do and you want to do what you love long term, you have to learn to not do it. Because the most burned out, dark-souled people I know are folks who resent the things they love in life.
Wow.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't come through the doorway to the practice of rest because I believed that it was one of the 10 commandments, which it totally is, and comes before murder. I did it because I loved and love the work of my life. And over the course of years, what rest has done is it has not only redeemed my work from my anxiousness, because my anxiousness eventually would dissolve the quality of my work, but it's actually redeemed me from the anxiousness that other people have about work. In other words, I get to do what I do because it's in my bones and it's who I am, and not just because I've got something to get done.
Yeah.
And now I have like a healthier relationship with work and a healthy relationship with myself in work, which is really the call of work, is not to get something done, but to become someone in the world.
Yeah.
So that is the evolution of my relationship with rest.
I love that. That's beautiful. So you basically got kidnapped by the Holy
I got tricked.
Spirit.
I was, Spirit was like, oh, that's funny. Want a job? You want a job? No job, only rest.
It's fabulous. I love it. I love it when God sometimes just whacks us upon the head, and
oh yeah. Yep.
Gets 100%. Us where we need to be. So I think, like, many times, and myself included, especially in the American culture, like when people think about rest, oftentimes I think I've been conditioned to think like it's basically you're just going to sit in a room, stare at the wall, and twiddle your thumbs. Just be like, it's the absence of productivity. So can you like kind of like debunk maybe some of these common misconceptions about rest, and maybe open up about like, what does rest actually look like for you tangibly?
Great. I'll give you a little bit. And then I have this collection of poems that would be really helpful for folks.
You do?
I do. Because there's so much to the actual practice of rest and what it is and what it does.
Yeah.
At 40,000 feet, rest is the practice of relationship. Rest is a practice that has to do with the relationship between myself and my own soul. Rest is a practice of relationship between myself and God. Rest is a practice of relationship between myself and the world around me. So rest is not ultimately the absence of other things. Rest is a way to be present in a more whole and complete way than I would be if I only worked. In the same way that work is a way to be present as well. So work is not just an activity. Work is a practice of relationship with myself, a practice of relationship with God, and a practice of relationship with people that I care about. What the practice of rest does, and what rest and it's more so for us in the West, is rest is the practice of rest is a way for us to become whole, rather than to become rested. The goal is not to become rested. There's no actual value in just being rested. There is value in being whole. And part of being whole is being someone who can be present to our own life. We use the word rested, but what we really mean spiritually when we say rested is I'm awake and alive to my own life. That's what it really means to be rested. When we talk about being rested in the context of work, what we mean is I'm ready to get back in it.
Yep.
And that's a terrible way to look at life. It's the issue we have. It's the issue. I'm going to say a bunch of stuff now. It's the issue I have with the vacation model of rest and recuperation.
Yep.
Is we leave, we put all this time, energy, and usually like crap tons of money, and then all kinds of pressure onto this like 5 to 15 day escape to Aruba, and then we come back tired. Because we probably drank too much because we don't know how to rest. We probably spent money on things we didn't enjoy. Now we have disappointment coming back.
Yep.
We ended up having like arguments and fights with people because we don't know each other's rest patterns and needs well enough. So you need things that I don't need and I don't want to do that. And hell no, I'm not hang gliding. What are you talking about hang gliding? Like we come back and we don't come back rested, but here's what we do come back with. We come back with the notion that somehow life, in the enjoyment of life, exists on a beach in Aruba. And I just haven't figured that out yet. Whereas this place I live, this household, this neighborhood, like this is the slog that I have to like grind through for another like 6 or 8 months before I get to go try that again.
Yeah.
Actual rest is a way to be present to my life so that when I am not in rest, I am still awake and alive to the goodness of my own life. That's like that's the heart of what I would say about what rest is.
Absolutely. As somebody who, has just grown up with conditioning to be, an overachiever and just like high functioning. I think a lot of people can relate with that. It's kind of interesting as you're talking, the visualization I'm getting is like, and kind of looking at the patterns in my life, right? And I've been starting to deconstruct this over the last few years, but yes, living kind of what you were saying before, a life orbited, your stance is like I'm orbiting around, basically making everything work so that I can be productive. And it's like the center of your universe. And it's like this rest, right, does not end a beach in Aruba. It's actually more so about the journey of releasing the mirage in the distance and recognizing like where my feet are planted right here.
Yes.
There's gold right here. And the posture in which I do or don't do. And it's not even about what we do and don't do. There's a lot of deconstruction and separateness that we have to do to, kind of separate ourselves from those things. But it's really interesting, like getting into meditation and things, right? Like now it's interesting, like after however many years I've been doing this, almost having that meditative approach now in life. Sometimes in parenting, on my really good days, I'm able to have that almost meditative, like I'm zoomed out when I'm watching myself, and it's this healthy, like detachment, and I can see my soul and its ebbs and its flows. And then that little voice, right? Our whole self starts to whisper and talk to us, and you're leaning into that. And it's like, it's been a beautiful journey. And a lot of these poems that you've been sharing, I just fumbled with how I tried to explain that. But in your book,
not at all.
A lot of these poems, I mean, they just resonate deeply. In certain seasons where I'm like, oh yeah, that was me last week. I don't get that one, but I'm sure I will in another couple of months or whatnot. So did you want to share some of the things?
Oh, sure, I can. I would tack on what you're saying that we use the word detachment a little bit. One of the I'm reading a book right now called 10,000. Nope, not 10,000 hours. Called 4,000 Weeks. Have you read this book?
No.
It's so good. It's called 4,000 Weeks: Time Management for Mortals. And the entire book is predicated on finitude. In other words, like you have 4,000 weeks. That's it. You got 4,000 weeks. And the issue that he has with time management programs, for the most part, is they're predicated on the notion that you can get it all done. Part of what we relinquish in the practice of rest, and it's why our souls oftentimes, not our souls, it's why the training in our souls, the
Mm-hmm.
cultural training, the bad culture training in our souls actually resists the practice of rest, is we have to relinquish the idea, and this is going to be so painful for some folks, that you're ever going to accomplish anything.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're not. You're really not.
Mm-hmm.
And even the great movements where beautiful things have happened, like no one actually gets to claim them. You're always part
Yeah.
of something. So if you're in the civil rights movement in the 60s and 70s, no one made that happen. You were part of a movement. We didn't get to stake a claim.
Yeah.
Rest as a challenge to the odd industrial notion that at some point you will have achieved something in life.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest, and this comes from a long spiritual tradition, not just in the Christian tradition, but the Taoist tradition as well, is that is, and you used the word a second ago, that is fundamentally an illusion. And what that illusion will do is it will keep you from actually enjoying and being present to the actual gift of life, which is, watch out, that you get to be alive.
Yeah.
The gift of life is that you get to be alive. The gift of life is not available on the other side of achieving something with the life you have. That's the lie that you'll be told that keeps you from actually receiving the gift of you and your life.
Yeah.
Rest as a practice challenges that notion, which is why there are billions and billions of dollars in industrial and religious ideologies that have leveraged themselves against the idea of rest. Because those machines need us to be anxious and worried, as opposed to rested, whole, and present. So I'm with you. Rest and detachment work hand in hand to set us free to be alive where we are.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. My husband and I just did something, our 10-year anniversary. I shared this on an earlier episode, so sorry if this is repetitive for listeners, but it kind of hits because, I think as a young couple, right, it's like, well, we want the house, we want to travel, we want to do all these things. And we did this practice. We just celebrated 10 years of marriage, and we let ourselves off the hook. We're like, okay, we're living our, quote, dream life, which for me as an Enneagram 7 was traveling the world and living in Airbnbs and doing all these things and collecting all these experiences. And so my husband gave me full permission. He's like, go there, do that. Like literally sit in that. We sat in it for a month of like, okay, these illusions that are kind of keeping us on the hook, right? And we sat with those: money, travel, all these things. And it took the shine away completely. And what we realized was, okay, now that we've actually sat with that and reflected, right, on what we're been conditioned to think is really matters, it's actually just right here, right now, and how we're experiencing life. And it's been, that was just this last summer, and it was just another layer of the onion, right? But my gosh,
that's really good.
It like completely freed us up in a beautiful way, and like our degree of presence with each other and with our kids and in our home, and just like the satiation that we have now is just, it's profound.
And what a gift you guys gave yourselves to actually hit pause in a good moment. One of the, I was looking earlier, one of the something you said struck. This is one of the early poems. It says, "Because I do not stop until I am worn out, or until something goes wrong, or something falls apart. The only time I take a long look at my life is when I'm in the dark or I'm in distress. And this keeps me from clearly seeing the gift it is to be alive." So 9 times out of 10 when we hit pause on life, it's because things have fallen apart. And so when I look up, things are in disarray. But to hit pause in moments where things are good and actually be able to evaluate life from the standpoint of like happiness, joy, and fulfillment, there's a real depth of actual reevaluation. Like, okay, what actually makes me happy? Like, what actually lands in my soul? I love that you got to do that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Okay, so we we had initially, Justin and I had initially connected. I had DM'd him on Instagram because he was sharing basically, I'm going to butcher this, but I don't know if you remember this. You were kind of talking about the intersection of like, yeah, we're going to take a little 90-degree, not a 180, but 90-degree
Great.
turn.
Let's go.
Rest is definitely integrated into this next conversation, but something that I'm fascinated
Yes.
with and love talking to people about, and in the work that I do, is really helping people engage in their faith and spirituality on all planes, mentally, physically,
Yes.
emotionally. The physical part is something that
Yes.
I've struggled with the most. And I think a lot of people have, a lot of women particularly, right, as kind of the purity culture resulted in, there's a lot of disembodiment,
Yeah.
right, in the church at large.
Yes.
So I guess like how you were kind of talking about, like, you are actively participating in a little bit of like reclamation of your faith physically, like with physicality. And
Yes.
that, the way you said it was so beautiful. And then we're probably losing some people of like, what the heck does that even mean? But my gosh, like, could you unpack maybe like
Sure.
physically?
Yes.
What does that
Easy
look like?
cheesy lemon squeezy. So let me point out the elephant in the room first. So the embodiment conversation in religious spaces like has this, for folks who come from a more conservative background, it can have a little bit of like the I want to use the word mystique, but it's more like stench of like witchcraft, and like it's like it comes from this like odd dark place where it's like, oh, so like it's about your body now and not about the spirit.
Yeah.
Here's the doorway you really walk through is when God decided to express God's self in the most comprehensive, complete, redemptive way. God lived a full human life in a body with other people who had bodies. And then just to tack on a little extra, when he was killed in the body, he was raised in the body. It is a denial. It is a full-blown denial of biblical Christianity to practice one's religion explicitly and only in my head and in my soul. To live disembodied as a person is a denial of the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ. So this is not about like, which, you know, some folks paint it as, and I get it. This is not about like coming to an embodied practice of religion because evangelical Christianity is garbage. No. The fulfillment of an evangelical life is one in which I am practicing my religion, my life as a whole person, including my body. So I want to start there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Secondly, as someone who lives with ADHD, legitimately, not one of those folks like, I think I'm ADHD. It's like, no, you're just not paying attention.
Yeah.
One of the struggles of folks of most neurodivergent persons is that there's so much happening with me physically that religious, academic, and industrial spaces are not attending to.
Yeah.
So I end up not fitting in to a lot of these spaces because I mean, it's as simple as like, I can't sit still for that long. It's not just because your sermon is boring. I mean, your sermon is definitely boring. But that's for you to deal with. It's totally you. No one needs 45 minutes. You don't need 45 minutes.
Yeah.
But like my body needs different things.
Yeah.
And because I can't show up in my body at a church service, or I can't sit in a work meeting for that long, or I can't do a job, and my body and the way my body actually works, because I live with ADHD, is disallowed in a lot of these spaces and kind of pushed out, and then I end up being, I'm the problem because I'm ADHD.
Yep.
An embodied practice of religion is one in which I get to hear from the God who created all things that there's room for all of you. And if you're wiggly, let's do that. If you need to get up and take a walk, I'll go with you.
Yeah.
If you can't sit, sorry guys, if you can't sit and read all of Matthew in one sitting, that's cool. Put the Bible down. Let's go outside and walk in the rain. I'll go with you.
Yeah.
An embodied practice of religion sets us free from, well, I'll say it like this. An embodied practice of religion invites us into a more whole and open-ended practice of religion in which there can be more of us.
Yeah.
Which means for some of us, it stops feeling like we don't belong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can belong here.
Absolutely.
There's room for you. There's room for you and your whole person.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, what that looks like now is on a rest/Sabbath day,
Mm-hmm.
I am outside as much as I can possibly be outside.
Mm.
Because I spend most of my days here
Yeah.
in a space like this,
Mm-hmm.
and I need to be somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I need to be moving.
Yeah.
And the more I've given that practice
Mm-hmm.
of like walking or biking or running or whatever, or even like lifting and being in the gym,
Yeah.
the more of I've given that practice over mentally
Mm-hmm.
to the phrase spiritual practice,
Yeah.
or spiritual disciplines,
Sure.
the more I have felt met
Mm-hmm.
in very mysterious, very between me and Jesus-y ways. And
Yes.
how wild the notion is it really that
Yeah.
when you are met by God in your
Yeah.
life, you don't know
Yeah.
what the hell to do with that? Doesn't that just kind of make more sense?
Yep.
But we've tricked ourselves over the course of years into this notion that if you've had a spiritual experience, you know what it means, you know what he said, and you know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Like, what God are we talking about?
Yeah.
So an embodied experience of God divorces us from the kinds of controls as well
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of spiritual practice
Mm-hmm.
teaches us. I don't get to
Mm-hmm.
decide what to do with it. I just get to receive it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think,
So there you go. There's my little diatribe is what we'll call that.
yeah, that's beautiful. I think, and it's in no form or fashion to like, point fingers at the church. I mean, just at large, right? I think generally speaking, I've been kind of just confined or taught to believe that I will experience God in these very like intellectual, wrestling, or I will find him in the carpeted four walls of church. And it's interesting, like, the overlap of conversation we're having, it's like there's been this franchising of this wild nature as a human, right? To be out in nature, to express all these things and to rest and all these things. And we've made them like special commodities that are,
Yes.
reserved for, the vacations or the this or the that. And it's like, no. That's actually like our divine design. Let's come back to
Yes.
that. It's not luxurious. It's essential.
Yes.
And just re-inviting people into that. And what I like to call it is kind of
Yeah.
rewilding their faith, rewilding their heart.
That's
Like
good.
allowing them to get outside. And I mean, gosh, it's just, it's nothing magic. It's nothing, like you said,
No.
new agey or dangerous. I think there's a lot of like fear around like, well, if I do a
Yep.
breath work class, if I engage these lungs that
Yes.
God gave me.
The next thing you
So,
know, you're slaughtering
gonna get-
chickens and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I going to be struck by lightning?
well,
No.
and I would say, and I say this to folks, I say this to artists about their desire to make art in
Mhm.
different facets, and I say this to folks in spiritual direction and coaching. It's like, don't trade one in for the other. Do all of it.
Yeah.
Do all of it.
Yeah.
Like, find a way to do all of it. Is your mind stimulated by Bible study and like research? Fantastic.
Mm.
Should you get outside and like, I don't know, take a walk in the rain and not bring your damn phone? Probably that one too.
Yeah.
But like, do both.
Absolutely.
Like, be a whole person.
Yeah.
So the way, and this is why I wrote the book Sacred Strides the way I wrote it.
Mm.
Parker Palmer says that action and contemplation, so work and rest, action and contemplation are one at the root. And the root is our insatiable desire to be fully alive.
Mm.
So that's the desire to know God academically, mentally, emotionally.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Do that.
Yeah.
But then also to know God in a way in which like there's a like an actual physical interaction between you and the divine that's
Yeah.
kind of mysterious in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Do that one too.
Yeah.
Because both things are leading you to that full aliveness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do all of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty incredible to see. I don't know, the more that I dig in, the more simplistic, right? Like everything really is.
Yes. That's
My
very true.
favorite my favorite church service starts with we gather to reverse the amnesia, which just means we're just remembering together, right? All the way
Wow, that's cool.
that we're designed. And that, if I can give you a compliment, I would say that oftentimes when I read your work, listen to your music, it's helping me remember. And so thank you for that. I actually wanted to share something with you today. I wrote this in my Bible. What's that?
I said, please.
Yeah.
By the way, that's also why I write. So if you experience a remembering, like, that's why I write, because I will forget it if I don't put it down.
Yeah. So I wrote this down in my Bible. This was 15 years ago. And you had said something that really stuck to me. This was when I was wrestling with why am I so sensitive? I want to go out. I want to be a nurse. I want to, go out, and growing up in this like system that I was the black sheep for caring so deeply about people. You gave me a superpower, and you gave me permission to kind of lean into that. So I wrote this in my Bible. It says, these are your words, by the way, in case I didn't tell you that. Yeah, it says, don't give up on your softness and sensitivity. They are not signs of weakness. In fact, they are the strength in you that shares in the suffering of others. And I don't know if that was actually written word or you just said it and it stuck. But yeah, that is permanently on my Bible and something that I tap into and lean into often. So
that means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. You mean a lot, and the work that you
landed for you.
Oh yeah, the work that you're doing is just so impactful. And on that note, as a closing, could you I know we've kind of dabbled and talked about a lot of your work, but like, how can people get in touch with you? I know now you're doing some spiritual direction and coaching. Can you kind of lean in of how people can connect with you and work with you?
Yes. So if you go to justinmcroberts.com, it's now mostly a portal to coaching and spiritual direction. And I post with the exception of one day a week. I'll post to Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, and the other one, Threads, every day as well. So if you find me online, I try to give away something every day. And then if you want to dig into like services like coaching and direction, you go through justinmcroberts.com.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and your energy.
My pleasure. Thanks for doing this. You got it.
And we'll talk soon. Thanks so much, Justin.
Thanks, Lo.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the All Seasons podcast. I hope today's episode lit you up with inspiration and illuminated your path with clarity. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please share with a friend. And also be sure to hit subscribe and leave a review. You can stay connected with me over at Instagram at LoLo Paz or A Soulful Sorrow. May you find your soul shine in all seasons. Until next time.